This video was made possible through the support of my patrons.
Have a blast of this, Matrix.
The canon is dead. Long live the canon. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and it's hard to know where exactly to begin when talking about the Timeless Children. As I said last week, I was a bit disappointed with how Ascension of the Cybermen was more about setting up more mysteries and moving the pieces in place, rather than helping to lighten the load by resolving a couple of smaller arcs, some smaller mysteries, and also just being a strong standalone episode, despite its nature of being the middle in this lone Cyberman trilogy. Now, all of my complaints for that first episode do hold true for the Timeless Children, with the exception of one, but we'll touch on that later. This finale is pretty jam-packed, and kind of to its detriment. That's been a constant for Series 12, which in hindsight makes the tagline "Space for All" seem a bit silly. However, in terms of the continuity shifting and the retconning, in fact, retconning isn't even the right word, because to its credit, you can dislike or like these revelations and this new revised backstory for the Doctor and the Time Lords, but I think if you take off any rose-coloured glasses or shit-coloured glasses and just look at the episode itself and the story, and you follow the logistics of this episode, you'll find that these reveals fit pretty well into place, at least when it comes to, the timeline and, like I said, the logistics of it. Whether or not these reveals work on a character level is another question entirely, and we'll save that for later. So let me back up. The episode opens immediately where the last one left off, and I'm so glad that there wasn't a massive time skip. I imagine it makes watching this and the past two episodes really fun in a marathon. Anyway, the Master threatens the Doctor into coming with him through the boundary to Gallifrey, leaving Ryan, Ko-Sharmus, and Ethan behind. Immediately, I'm reminded of just how much I loved Sacha Darwin in Spyfall, and with this episode, he has cemented himself as my favourite revived series incarnation of the Master. This is not only an insanely good performance, where it seems like the Master is just on the verge of tears the entire time, yet he's still exuding a megalomaniacal energy that makes him threatening, but also oddly endearing and sympathetic. I said in my Spyfall Part 2 review that the Master is clearly hurting, and that still holds true here, and now we know what is fueling that hurt, an inferiority complex due to what he's learned about the Doctor. It's one hell of a motivator, especially considering their long history together. No wonder appealing to his better nature this time is simply not an option. This reveal has not just changed things for the Doctor, but it's changed things for the Master. And I think framing the impending reveals through the lens of the Master and how the Master feels and reacts to it was a really smart and interesting thematic approach. It makes what could have been just an info dump of a story, which, it kind of is, but that personal touch, that personal edge, really does carry the story.
You know what I find the most infuriating? You always behaved like you were different, like you were special. And you were. You can see why I'm angry. A little piece of you is in me. All I am is somehow because of you, and believe me when I say I cannot bear that.
And seeing Jodie Whittaker rise to meet Darwin halfway with that unhinged energy was actually pretty disarming to watch, further hitting home that in my opinion this Doctor is at her most interesting when she's not putting on a front in front of her companions.
I remember growing up, I remember you and me at the academy together.
That happened. It just wasn't your first life.
Why would they lie? Why would they do that?
I wish it wasn't true, but it is.
Show me the rest.
I'm not sure you can cope with much.
Show me the rest! I have a right to know my own life.
I love the Master and his dialogue in this story, whether it's toying with the Doctor, trying to form an alliance with Ashad, flirting with the Cyberium. This scene almost makes up for the fact that there is literally no discernible difference in personality or physical attributes when the two join forces. I think that was a missed opportunity. Still, this dialogue sparkles, and I hope this Master sticks around for years and years to come.
You'll be robots.
We shall be dominant.
But robots? Oof, can't be disappointed. I see how you got there. An AI wanting to create more things in its own image, but it lacks vision. Right, what if we workshop this, kick it around a bit? I have a nose.
You question the strategy of the Cyberium.
I do. I mean, it's good, but it's not great. There's loads of robots. Throw a stick in this universe, you'll hit a robot. I used to do that. Any idiot can make themselves into a robot. It's not special.
As for the Cybermen, I'm glad that, at least at the beginning of the story, they're not utterly invincible initially. When they go to attack the humans at the boundary with their strength coming from their numbers and exploiting human weaknesses and emotion by taking a hostage. As for Ashad, after a great introductory episode and a decent second showing, it's clear that Chibnall just had to get this piece off the board and he just zaps him away. Now, the Master killing him is entirely appropriate, but for such a promising character, I think a more dignified and bigger send-off would have done him more justice. Ashad was a breath of fresh air, and the sequence with him hunting the humans hiding in the cybersuits was genuinely edge-of-your-seat scary. But it's obvious that once Ashad is revealed to be holding this death particle which just comes out of nowhere, it's clear that he needs to be taken off the board, and Chibnall just does it as quickly as possible. Yeah, I know the particle is supposedly set up with what he said to the Doctor in the last episode, but a throwaway line that could literally mean anything isn't good setup. However, once he's gone, it means that we get the Cybermasters, Cybermen who are actually deceased Time Lords. Are these designs silly? Yes, they are, but I love them. The only thing I would change is that it's a bit too on the nose for them to have the teardrop eyes and the sad mouth shape. Have one or the other. But I love this on-the-nose design. This is exactly what Cybermen mixed with Time Lords should look like, because remember...
This is a film about space wizards intended for children.
This is a better hybrid than what Series 9 gave us, I'll tell you that for a fact. Remember when the Daleks started using regeneration energy in The Witch's Familiar, but we as an audience had no idea what they were actually doing or what this meant? Here, it's a hell of a lot clearer, meaning that the stakes of these new Cybermasters actually mean something.
Well, let's test it out. Shoot him.
You what, mate? But that's Jeff. I can't shoot Jeff.
Yeah, why do I have to be the guinea pig here? I just got these robes and they go great with my new complexion.
Shoot him.
Jeff, I think he really means it. You'll be okay if I do it, right?
I think so. I've never done this before.
Well, you always joked about how I'd be your first.
Now that's just immature, Steve.
Alright, jeez, I'm only a foot away from you and I've got cyber-enhanced hearing. You don't need to shout, Jesus Christ.
Good dog! All dead. Wait. Could it be? Yes, it could!
Holy shit, that actually worked. Are you okay, Jeff? I am now no longer Jeff. I am Jeff. I don't get it. It's Jeff with a J instead of a G. It kind of only works when it's written down. I was tempted to change my name to David Banks, but I thought that was too much of a deep cut. I don't know, Jeff, I think that name choice would have been excellent. See, he got the reference as well.
So the Master's plan was to bring the Doctor down with the hidden knowledge that he discovered within the Matrix, or at least partially discovered. So, long story short, a long time ago in a galaxy far away, the original indigenous race of Gallifrey were the Shobogans, which is a callback to the Deadly Assassin, and an explorer discovered a child on another world abandoned on the other side of a portal. She took the child in, only to discover that this adoptive daughter could regenerate after death. After years of trying and several regenerations for the child, she was able to isolate the regenerative abilities and gene splice it into all Shobogans, who renamed themselves the Time Lords, who appointed themselves as universal elites. That abandoned child was the Doctor, and while Time Lord society was developing, she joined a Time Lord organization called the Division. These particular memories with the Division were buried and disguised as a boring vision, which was the Brendan subplot from the last episode, but the rest has been deleted from the Matrix. So, we'll get to whether or not I like this in a moment, but in terms of the story and the world-building narrative, this fits in surprisingly well. Like, this doesn't actually contradict much. Does it rewrite the history of the Time Lords? Well, it rewrites their story, but them burying their true origins is directly in character for them. History is written by the victors after all, and the Time Lords do have a habit of doing incredibly damning and depressing and corrupt stuff. Okay, so what about prior Doctors pre-William Hartnell? Well, this idea was floated around since the Patrick Troughton era, and let's not even get started on the brain of Morbius. There are a few holes left to fill, like how did the Doctor go from the timeless child and become the Doctor that we know? Like, I'm going to assume that the Doctor, once he's done his work with the Division in the past, gets his memory wiped and then becomes the William Hartnell Doctor that we know, and that's really the first Doctor. I'm going to assume that, but I would love to see that story play out. Also, who wipes that from the Matrix, and why, and what happened during the Doctor's time in the Division? These are stories that I'm interested in seeing develop further. I don't think this is a bad revised origin story for the Doctor, and let me compare it to prior examples so hopefully you get my point. Now, let's take a look at both extremes here. You've got the Time War, which means that the Doctor is no longer a part of Time Lord society. He doesn't have to answer to anyone, for better or for worse. The Doctor hated his own people and ran away from them and sought to distance himself from their inaction, but removing them from the equation shows that the Doctor had a very complex relationship with his own people, how he hated them, he didn't want to be associated with them, but now that they're gone, he misses them deep down, and he misses that identity and that place to call home. He never wanted it before, but he misses it now that it's gone. This status quo shift further explores the Doctor as a character and makes him more interesting, and gives us more story possibilities. No, it's not really an altered backstory, it's just a different status quo, but there are crossover concepts at play here thematically. Now let's look at a change gone bad with the hybrid, and how the Doctor didn't really leave his people because he hated the lifestyle and maybe he wanted to prevent his granddaughter from being a part of it. No, he left because of some spooky, scary prophecy, which has never been mentioned before, and is only being brought up now because we need a series arc for Series 9. It actively makes the Doctor less interesting, and I've effectively removed Hellbent from my headcanon. Hey, did you know that therapy is expensive? Fund it on my Patreon. For £1 a month you can get early video access and ensure that no child has to watch Hellbent again. So, where does the Timeless Children fit in on this scale between Time War and the hybrid? Well, in my opinion, somewhere in the middle, because it doesn't directly contradict what we know, but apart from giving the Doctor Who Wikia fan page, the TARDIS Wiki fan page, a few more opening paragraphs to the Doctor's biography, how does it change the Doctor? Okay, maybe there will be some interesting stories to tell with the Doctor finding out where she came from, why she was abandoned, maybe even Jodie Whittaker's Doctor meeting Tecteun, the woman who adopted her. Maybe she was the woman the Doctor saw in The End of Time Part 2, I don't know. However, as for the Doctor herself, it actually doesn't change her as a character. For example, you tell Graham that he didn't have cancer, or that Grace wasn't who he thought she was, then that actually changes his outlook, that changes his character. The Doctor's not like that, though. She ran away from her people, and even when they were back, she wasn't really in a hurry to go visit them, and the ruthless Doctor even outright states that this does not change who she is.
How many more of me are out there?
I don't have those answers. But say I did. Would they even help?
course they would. All this? It means I'm not who I thought I was.
Because your memories aren't compatible with what you've learned today.
Yes.
Have you ever been limited by who you were before?
Now that does sound like me talking.
So while it's good in a way that this can slot into the Doctor's past and not change anything, it's bad because it doesn't really change anything, and that's quite disappointing. It's why I think people stating that this is a betrayal of the past and Doctor Who is ruined now and that the canon is dead is a massive, massive exaggeration and most likely just performative. It usually is. Make no mistake, Bolstrek is way more upset that the Doctor can regenerate into someone who isn't white more than anything else in this episode.
And take note, that little cannon destroyer isn't a white male, because Chibs the Idiot's era of the show formerly known as Doctor Who doesn't want to offend anyone.
That's obvious, but from a bigger picture analysis, it's all lore and details and no actual character change. Like, it's not as if we had a season or two where the Doctor has been getting along with the Time Lords recently, so this is a betrayal. No, the Doctor has always disliked his or her race, and this just further adds to it. We've never met or seen this adoptive mother before, so there's no sense of a betrayal from an established parental figure. Now, I do find this backstory interesting, and the gaps with the division and why they were erased are ones that I'm interested in learning more about. For example, in that sequence where we see that pre-Hartnell Doctor character talking to a Time Lord about Time Lord intervention being part of the division's whole philosophy, I want to see how the Time Lord Society went from that to their strict non-interference. Like, that's an interesting story. That is an interesting fundamental shifting of what we've known about the Time Lords before. I want to see that. But right here, right now, the Doctor is still the Doctor. And that's both good from a canon perspective, but bad because it's not interesting on a story level. Now, to clarify, I do prefer this unintrusive middle ground approach as opposed to actively taking away from the lore with episodes like Hell Bent, but I think the Timeless Children not only could have done a hell of a lot more to shift the dynamics of the universe, but it should have laid way more groundwork outside of a subplot in Fugitive of the Judoon, and need I remind you that that subplot was one of 4 subplots in that episode. There's also still a few gaps here, like why is Ruth's TARDIS a police box? Why is she calling herself the Doctor if this is pre-Doctor, etc.? Basically, this reveal is to throw the Doctor off balance for 3/4 of the episode and to shock the audience. Does that have value? Yeah, in some circumstances it does, but if shocking the audience is your only goal, then you could have replaced this backstory with the Master breathing into a paper bag and blowing it up. Also, the reveal that the Master was projecting these Brendan scenes into the Doctor's mind doesn't really work, because A, there was zero indication that these were projections, and B, the Doctor didn't react or acknowledge them in the last episode, so that kind of falls flat. They shouldn't have mentioned that bit at all. And if you hate these revelations, then that's completely fair enough. However, for once, just for the hell of it, can we keep the outrage in perspective? And I'm going to apply this standard to me as well. Don't worry, I'm not completely going to be complicit in everything that I've said or done. Like, for example, I hate Hellbent. I think it's a terrible story. I keep on talking about it all these years later. But in my initial reaction, in my initial review, when I said it damaged the Doctor Who universe beyond repair, yeah, there's some terrible story elements in there, and I think that they do detract from the lore in some respects and in some elements, but damaging the show beyond repair, it's been like 4 or 5 years since that story was broadcast, and it's never been brought up again. Like, it's clearly not damaged the show beyond repair, they've just ignored it, so that was kind of a stupid and short-sighted thing for me to say. I stand by the actual arguments that I've made in that review, but saying that it damaged the show beyond repair, that was just stupid hyperbole. But anyway, like I was saying, let's keep this outrage in perspective. Like, do you think that this backstory won't immediately just be swept under the rug the moment a different showrunner takes over if it doesn't really work out? This isn't like the classic series where there were subtle, barely noticeable differences from showrunner to showrunner, except for those really paying attention and seeing those baton passes between the editors and the producers. Modern TV and modern Doctor Who is much more creator-driven, for better or for worse. And these changes are so noticeable now that you can easily compartmentalize the revived series into different eras, even when they share similar creative teams. So let's see how this backstory for the Doctor plays out over the next couple of years, and once Chris Chibnall has departed from the role, see if someone else carries it on, or decides to get rid of it. And if you don't think that will happen, like I said, there's been no mention of the hybrid for 5 years. Moffat changed the outcome of the Time War. Back in the classic series, the Doctor's regeneration was established to be tied to the TARDIS itself, but that went out the window. If you don't like the Timeless Children's revelations, fair enough, but this isn't exactly the ending or the death of the canon. It's a new phase in an ever-evolving, ever-changing story that's known as Doctor Who. It's messy, it's contradictory, it's absurd, it's strange, it's really confusing. But it's Doctor Who, and it's one of the reasons why I love it. Anyway, that's my hot take on this revised origin, so let's rapid fire through some other points. Last week I mentioned how Ko-Sharmus was just a generic old hermit guy, but he turns up in this episode like an entirely different character who's funny, clever, and a much more bold and defined personality. Ko-Sharmus is the one criticism that I had of Ascension of the Cybermen that did not pass over to this episode. In this story, the best companion moment was Yaz just walking straight through the boundary, and the worst was Ryan not doing anything to comfort or help the Doctor as she goes to a certain death.
We're not letting you go. You're not doing this. Get off me, Az! Please.
Yaz. Come on.
Good talk, Ryan, good talk. Really justifying that 3-person TARDIS team, aren't you?
You detonate that thing, you'll die too.
That's the way it has to be. And I would do that in a heartbeat for this universe.
Stop, don't come back.
Also, the rest of the human cast are pretty forgettable, but thankfully this episode does know where its strengths lie, and that's in the evolving stakes and the Doctor-Master dynamic, which is fascinating to watch unfold. I'm a bit disappointed that Ko-Sharmus, though, has to swoop in and save the day at the end. While I can't see any incarnation of the Doctor pressing that kill switch, it still is pretty bad optics to have the old man come in and save the day instead of our first female Doctor, and maybe it would have been a more impactful sacrifice if it was Graham or Ryan. It would have been much more in character, I think. It means that this story ends with an anticlimax emotionally, which is a shame because the Doctor's departure from the borrowed TARDIS and her last walk down the corridor was brilliantly done. I love the music, the performance, everything about this scene, and it feels like this could have been a genuine final stand for the 13th Doctor. It's a bit of a shame, though, that she doesn't really have much agency in this episode. She spends half an hour watching The Matrix, the Ruth Doctor tells her how to break free, Ravio tells her about Ashad's death particle, which the Master deliberately leads her to and leaves for her to use, and then Ko-Sharmus detonates it for her. There is merit to a passive Doctor. Heck, that's what the Eccleston era is literally all about, but it shouldn't be this weighted against our lead character. But the episode ends with the Doctor separated from her companions, and the most unrealistic, controversial thing in this episode happens. The Judoon somehow teleport inside the TARDIS. Then she's imprisoned in what could be Shada, and that's the cliffhanger, and the Doctor and friends will be back this holiday season in Revolution of the Daleks. This finale is a mixed bag, and in my opinion leaning on good. Emotionally, it's way more fulfilling than some prior finales. The revelations are interesting, but ultimately meaningless in its current form, so I hope future seasons and future stories actually explore these implications and make them into something more than just more work for fan wikis and fan historians to track and document. Jodie Whittaker is great here, but her Doctor isn't very proactive, though the Master is terrific and I do love the Cybermasters, but Ashad's fate is so abrupt. But I really like Yaz's few moments to shine here, and Graham gets that great scene, but Ryan had nothing to do here, and Ko-Sharmus was pretty cool, but the rest of the human characters were so tepid, and yeah, I'm all over the place here. Structurally, it works and holds up, but there's a lot of elements here that could have been handled better, and some story ideas that are a bit sloppy. I'll still take the Timeless Children over finales like Death in Heaven, Hellbent, The Wedding of River Song, and The Name of the Doctor any day of the week. The Battle of Ranskoor Av Kolos might be held together better on a structural sense, but this one feels bigger. It has higher and more interesting stakes, and takes bigger and bolder risks. While the lasting impact of these revelations are up in the air, and if you hate everything about them or not, You can't deny that this episode is a risk, and that's interesting. Whether or not this has a long-term impact like the Time War, or is just another addition to the lore to be swiftly forgotten like the Valyard or the Hybrid, remains to be seen. The future is interesting. Whether or not the future is bright is entirely subjective, but its future is interesting, and I'm looking forward to exploring it. Oh, and where does Captain Jack fit in all this? Was that really just a one-off cameo in that episode? That's a bit silly. And that's Doctor Who Series 12, everyone, so thank you so much for watching this review. Be sure to appease the YouTube algorithm by hitting that like button and leaving a comment, any comment, in the comment section below. That's one way you can support my channel, and you can also support my channel by becoming a patron through the links in the description below, where you'll get early video access, access to a Discord server, and many other perks. I'd also like to give a particular shout out to these patrons: Anne Neubauer, Callum Baird, Charlotte Pierce Cornish, Dean Jones, EVG Express, Joseph Adams, Katie Maxwell, Luna Day, Matthew Perry, Palex, Paul Warbeck, Raven Wood, Rebecca Hill, Shazeb Mangi, The Brit Sniper, Vibraphonic Marxism, William Jacques, and Zachary Taylor, aka Mario Fanboy 15. As for the future of this channel now that Series 12 is over, well, we've got to do some roundup videos. We've got to talk about those viewing figures, we've got to talk about the best and worst moments, and I also have a few other videos in the pipeline as well. We've got some more unboxings coming up, we've got some list videos planned, we've got loads more coming, and if you want to be the first to know when that happens, please subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you folks next time.